The Antarctic ice sheet is growing, it's not melting, and I'll come back to this in a minute and show you the data for that. We hear every day, or I hear every day, accounts that, oh, the polar ice caps are melting at an accelerating rate, and so we're all going to drown from rising sea level. And I'll show you the data for that. And as I said, most all the 10,000 years has been warmer than present. So let's address the question, are the polar ice caps melting? And here are a couple of quotes I'll just let you read for yourself. This is a magazine cover, polar ice caps are melting faster than ever. Well, guess what? There's no polar ice cap at the North Pole. There's an ocean. There is no ice cap at the North Pole. So we don't have to worry about it. The ice there is only about 3 meters thick, which is inconsequential in terms of the total ice of the continent. This is what it looks like. It's floating sea ice. There are no glaciers at the North Pole. The Arctic sea ice fluctuates, the aerial extent. There have been times when it was warmer and you could sail ships across the Arctic Ocean. The Chinese did it in 1420s. And we hear a lot about the polar bears who are in trouble because the sea ice is melting. But what I can tell you is that the polar bear population has gone from 5,000 to 25,000 during that same period when the sea ice was supposed to be melting. And they survived 10,000 years of climate warmer than today, so they're going to be just fine. Let's look at the Antarctic ice sheet. And this is what you'll see in the headlines. It's melting at an accelerating rate. This is untrue. It's actually growing, not melting. Antarctica consists of a continent with a huge ice sheet. This is the Antarctic ice sheet. It's about 15,000 feet thick at its thickest point. Temperatures there are exceedingly cold. I'll show you those in a moment. There's a little arm right here called the West Antarctic Peninsula that has warm water around it, which has been melting some of the floating ice there in recent years and causing some glacial melt. But this is a minuscule part of the total volume of ice that occurs on the continent of Antarctica. And the reason is that the average daily temperature in Antarctica is 58 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. The last winter temperature at South Pole reached minus 106 degrees. To get any ice to melt, you would have to raise the average daily temperature from minus 58 to 32 degrees, which is the melting point of ice, plus another 10 degrees or so to get any appreciable melting to occur. You would have to warm Antarctica 100 degrees to melt the Antarctic ice cap. How likely do you think that is? I'll let you judge for yourself. It's not going to happen. The other thing about Antarctica is that because of the situation at the pole and the continental area, it makes its own weather, and there is a strong weather gyre that goes all the way around Antarctica, and the Antarctic ice cap has not disappeared in 15 million years, despite temperatures considerably warmer than we have today. Antarctic ice cap is not melting. We have ice cores through the ice cap that show us that there are no gaps in the ice record. If the Antarctic ice cap had melted before when temperatures were warmer, we would have gaps. We don't have them, which means that the Antarctic ice cap is exceptionally stable. It's much more stable than temperate glaciers. It's not going anywhere. Here is the record at the South Pole, which has been kept since 1957. This is the average, and you don't see any change in the temperature at the South Pole. And there are two stations that record temperatures. One is the South Pole, and the other is Vostok, which is a Russian station. And they show the same thing, namely that there has been no warming in Antarctica since records have been kept in 1957. Again, emphasize the point, the Antarctic ice cap is not melting. I'm going to skip this in the interest of time and move directly to CO2 as a possible cause of significant global warming by itself.
Dr. Easterbrook, Senator Billick has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we're talking about the melting, how about glaciers? Because I've seen the empirical evidence of glaciers melting. So do you disagree with that evidence, or do you think that it's something other than warming that's causing that?
No, and warming, certainly, I agree with that totally. And what I have said from the beginning is that we've had a number of periods of warming, cooling, and the answer to the question is during periods of warming, of course they melt. During times of cooling, they advance, they grow. So glaciers grow, recede, grow, recede, grow, recede. And we can look at the record in Greenland, for example, and we'll see that the record there, the temperature record there, is exactly the same as the global temperature record. And so the ice in Antarctica, the ice in Greenland was surely melting at a different rate from 1978 to 1998 than it was during the cool period between 1945 and 1977. So what I'm saying is, yes, global warming causes glaciers to melt. That doesn't prove what's causing it. I mean, hell, I had hair before global warming. I don't make a cause and effect connection there, and you can't make a cause and effect connection just because CO2 happened at the same time to go up at the same time that the climate warmed. Because in all these earlier periods, there was no CO2 factor, and it still got warmer.
Thank you. But you said the last 12 years we haven't been warming. So are you saying that that means that glaciers have not melted in the last 12 years?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that we have a very good record of the glaciers' advance and retreat during the past century. And from 1880 to 1915, glaciers advanced to almost their maximum position, certainly in the last several hundred years. They advanced. From 1915 to 1945, they retreated like crazy at a rate probably greater than the last decade. And then in 1945, the climate got cooler, and they advanced again. And they advanced to positions that were actually down valley in many cases from their earlier ones. And then it got warm again from 1978 to 1998, and they began to retreat again. And then since 1998, many of the glaciers have stopped retreating, and some are starting to advance. It's true in Alaska, it's true in Scandinavia, true in some parts of South America, but not every glacier behaves the same way, so not every glacier has stopped melting.
Thank you.
It is the nature of glaciers to melt when the climate warms.